The Marvel Cinematic Universe, also known as the MCU, is one of the biggest film franchises in the world right now, with each entry getting better as they go along, and even the worst ones not even being necessarily bad. Each movie is a box office smash, and each movie is special in its own way. This is Ethan Butler, and today I'm going to be doing a video on my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movies ranked from worst to best. Even the movies I rank as bad aren't really bad movies on their own. It's just that each Marvel movie has high expectations. Just letting you know, there's no spoilers, so if you haven't seen some of these movies, you're safe with me. Number 19, Thor: The Dark World. This movie is like the first one, but less fun, more boring science and magic talking, a forgettable villain, boring characters, and tons of CGI. Loki was obviously the best part of this movie, as he is in every Thor movie, but besides that, it wasn't a very memorable movie. And that's why it's my least favorite MCU movie. I'm gonna give it a C-. Number 18, Iron Man 2. This movie just felt like filler until the Avengers, the introduction to Black Widow, and pretty much any scene with Nick Fury redeemed it for me, but the villain sucked. And probably the most forgettable Marvel villain I've ever seen. Scenes were stretched out way too far, and Iron Man kind of just sat around eating donuts. It took his knowledge and smartness away from him to make him a dull, stupid character. The end battle was just an average Marvel third act. Overall, this was a boring, needless MCU movie that you don't have to see in order for the MCU to make sense, because everything shown and discussed in this movie is never mentioned again. I'm gonna give it a C-. Number 17, Thor. A boring origin story that really just exists so you can recognize that blonde guy in the Avengers. Thor is a very snotty character that you couldn't care less about. This movie should have made these characters more memorable so you can actually remember their names. There's tons of CGI that makes this movie age badly, unlike Iron Man or Captain America, even though this movie came out like 7 years ago. But I honestly can't remember anything that happens in this movie except for Loki. It's too bad that Thor wasn't a memorable or character that we cared about. I'm gonna give it a C+. Number 16, Doctor Strange. Just a weird, confusing movie that was pretty good for an origin story. This is probably the best version of this movie we're ever gonna get. It suffers from normal things that Marvel movies suffer from: a weak villain, forgettable supporting characters, and forgetting what it's even about. Benedict Cumberbatch's performance was what I really loved. He's one of my favorite actors. Love stories shouldn't have been part of this movie, though I did have a good time with this movie. I respect this movie for what it is, but it's really just introducing him so we can recognize him in future MCU movies. I'm gonna give it a B-. Number 15, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This movie's fairly underrated. It develops the characters that we loved in the first movie, especially Star-Lord. Has more emotion than action, which I loved. It gave us probably one of the saddest Marvel deaths, and did a good job connecting with the backstory with the main story. Kurt Russell's performance was awesome. It's always great to see him. This movie was very forgettable. The side characters weren't very memorable, and the plot wasn't either. You don't have to see this in order for the MCU to make sense, but watch it anyway. I had a good time with it. It's just the fact that you can't really remember anything when it's done. I'm gonna give it a B-. Number 14, Avengers: Age of Ultron. Everyone loved this movie when it first came out, but then after a while it started to get pushed back in the ranked MCU movies lists. It did develop characters while giving us good action, a lot of emotion, but also has Iron Man throwing away everything he learned in Iron Man 3 and some side stories that didn't make much sense. Sometimes it just got flat out weird, but did something I never really saw in any other Marvel movie, showing all the Avengers together, getting along and working together. It was weird to see that, with them enjoying each other's company. It was different, fun, and entertaining. Introductions to Scarlet Witch and Vision were cool, but it's not a perfect movie. I'm gonna give it a B. Number 13, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Fun and entertaining movie that calms us down and gives us a lighter movie after the dark ending in Infinity War, but really did suffer from a forgettable villain and every other villain just annoyed me and were just unlikable. It also had a needless romance between Scott and Hope, which just shouldn't have happened. That will probably never go anywhere. Seeing the character Luis again was hilarious. I love Michael Pena's performance as him. The Ferris Bueller style they had was fun too. Seeing Scott Lang having to race back to go home before the FBI does, so they won't see that he's escaped. The jokes were well placed and was all around really funny and a good time. It connected well with Infinity War too. I'm gonna give it a B. Number 12, Ant-Man. Light, funny, entertaining movie, just like its sequel. Ant-Man introduces characters well while having good action sequences. It takes a silly hero that is Ant-Man and makes a feature-length movie out of it. The only problem I had with it was the weak, boring, and bald villain. He really ruined the experience for me, but besides that, I had a great time with it. It had great and hilarious performances from Paul Rudd, Michael Pena, and Michael Douglas. Overall, fun movie for everybody. I'm gonna give it a B+. Number 11, Iron Man 3. Underrated Marvel sequel that I had a blast with. This movie is really hated for the plot twist of the Mandarin. I really don't know why people have such a hard time with it. That plot twist I thought worked, and I thought it was really funny. The actual villain, played by Guy Pearce, was the weakest part. His motives were pretty dumb, and his powers they had tested on people just made no sense, and I feel like they could have elaborated more on it. A few plot holes, but no big deal. Depiction of PTSD was good. I think they did a good job on that, and showed the cool side of Iron Man that we never really got to see. Fun movie and hated for stupid reasons. I think I'm gonna give it a B+. Number 10, Black Panther. This one I actually find to be overrated. This movie is really known for its cultural significance, but if you take that away, it starts to feel like a Marvel movie. Just a normal, average Marvel movie at times. People say the villain is very sympathetic, which I honestly couldn't sympathize with him. It was a great performance from Michael B. Jordan, and probably one of the best performances in the MCU. He didn't get that much screen time, so I don't know why people say they can sympathize with someone that's barely shown on screen. This was a very entertaining movie, but suffered from a forgettable third act fight and bad CGI. But this movie definitely isn't bad. Far from it. Chadwick Boseman's performance as T'Challa was one of the best superhero portrayals I've seen in a while. The action gives everybody chills. The suit he had was really cool and the action scenes were stunning. The plot was interesting and this movie was pretty fast-paced. It moved well. It did something no other Marvel movie really did, that you don't have to see every single MCU movie for this one to make sense. This is one of my favorite movies of 2018, and I could watch it over and over again. I'm gonna give it an A-. Number 9, Guardians of the Galaxy. Fun space movie that takes away characters that no one really knew but comic book nerds, and makes them funny, relatable characters that we all love. A very rewatchable action comedy movie. The only problem I had with it was the weak villain, whose problems I couldn't care less about, and any scene with him in it just made me want to go back and see the heroes on screen again. The dialogue could be confusing at times, but I love this movie. CGI was great, and the jokes landed well, and how could I talk about this movie without mentioning the soundtrack? The most catchy soundtrack in any Marvel movie. It's a very entertaining movie and a really good time. I'm gonna give it an A-. Number 8, Captain America, the First Avenger. This is another underrated Marvel movie. I think besides Iron Man, this is probably my favorite Marvel origin story movie. The villain is actually threatening and played by the great Hugo Weaving. Though the side characters are very forgettable, I feel like this movie should be remembered more. The story is very well developed and the ending all makes sense. This is one of the first Marvel movies I actually watched, so this actually got me to watch the MCU. The love story in it actually worked, surprisingly. Chris Evans as Captain America was just the perfect casting choice. Should be appreciated more, I think. But it's a very great Marvel movie and it's very underrated too. I'm gonna give it an A. Number 7, Iron Man. The first MCU movie that started a huge universe. Iron Man has actually aged very well, unlike Thor. It's my favorite origin story Marvel movie. It works so well with a story that felt like it was divided into multiple movies with all the different locations. I think my only problem with it was probably Terrence Howard's performance as Rhodey. Thank goodness he was recast in the second movie, being played by Don Cheadle now, and I like him so much more. Also, Jeff Bridges didn't feel like he cared about his role as the villain. His performance wasn't bad, it's just he felt like he didn't really want to be there. Director Jon Favreau, who actually plays Hap, he did an amazing job kicking off this universe with one great movie. And how can I talk about this movie without mentioning the best superhero movie decision ever? And that was casting Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. This man owns the role, and now no one else can imagine anyone taking on this role. He's just perfect for it. Great action movie. I'm gonna give it an A. Number 6, Captain America Civil War. This movie takes on a bunch of characters and shoves them all into one movie, but they did it in style, and they did it so each character is important to the story. I mean, except for Ant-Man, but besides that, everyone's pretty important. It introduces Black Panther and Spiderman to the MCU, and it creates something awesome, the airport scene. The airport scene is the best fight scene I've seen in any Marvel movie, let alone any superhero movie. Probably one of my favorite fight scenes of all time. It's so well choreographed and shot well, and everyone gets a part in it. The dialogue's just so good, and it's just so cool. The movie has some other awesome fight scenes too, and the action scenes are just so awesome. But the one problem I had with the movie was the plot could be pretty weak at times. The reason they're fighting was pretty stupid and made me mad that the Avengers were splitting up, and I felt like it was a dumb reason for them to split up. The villain was kind of a background character and kind of watched everything happen, so he wasn't really a sympathetic character. He was just there. But the action scenes are so breathtaking and fun, you start to forget about some of the dumb things in it and some of the plot holes, I guess. I'm gonna give it an A. Number 5, Avengers Infinity War. Probably the biggest Marvel movie ever. Infinity War takes all the characters from the MCU, except for Hawkeye and Ant-Man, and creates this huge battle against probably the best Marvel villain ever, Thanos. First off, Josh Brolin's performance as Thanos was pretty much flawless. He was a villain that we cared about. Honestly, he was the main character. The Avengers were really just side characters. It was cool to see all these characters, but all in different locations, fighting for the same purpose. But they're not even together. Just separated in different groups. I feel like it was just cool to see all these different characters in different locations, all fighting against the same person. This is the best version of this movie we're ever gonna get, and there's just no other way to do it than have the Russo brothers direct it. The Russo brothers went above and beyond to bring us a movie with lovable characters, a great villain, good comedy, and awesome action sequences with an ending that surprised us all. I'm gonna give it an A. Number 4, Spider-Man Homecoming. Relatable teenage action comedy movie. Spider-Man is finally introduced into the MCU after multiple reboots, and this is the best Spider-Man I've ever seen. Yeah, even better than Spider-Man 2. Tom Holland delivers an amazing performance as Peter Parker, and this is the best version of Spider-Man we're ever gonna get. The villain was really good too. Michael Keaton gives us a sympathetic portrayal as a man just trying to fend for his family. Relatable and funny characters, and a story that works. I could watch this movie over and over again. It's a really funny and entertaining movie. I'm gonna give it an A. Number 3, Thor Ragnarok. The funniest Marvel movie ever. This movie just redeemed the character Thor, because just before he was just boring. In past MCU movies, he just wasn't a fun character to watch. But this movie made him cool, funny, and entertaining to watch. Thor movies, Loki always stole the show, but this movie he gets kind of pushed to the side, so Thor can have the credit he never really got. Great CGI, a great villain in both. Hela, played brilliantly by Cate Blanchett, and the Grandmaster, played weirdly by Jeff Goldblum. Side characters were fun to watch, and the improv was the best part. Hilarious dialogue and comedy. Taika Waititi gives us the best Thor movie, and probably one of the best Marvel movies ever made. I'm gonna give it an A+. Number 2, The Avengers. This is the first Marvel movie I ever saw, and watching this as a kid was just mind-blowing. To this day, it still is. It takes all the characters that we've gotten to know in the past movies in Phase 1 and makes them all important characters. This had a great villain in Loki, and an awesome third act in the Battle of New York scene at the end. The comedy worked, and the characters were well developed. This movie developed everybody and made each person important. They all had their time to shine. For a while, this was my favorite Marvel movie. I'm gonna give The Avengers an A+. So, number 1, Captain America, The Winter Soldier. My favorite Marvel movie, and let alone my favorite superhero movie of all time, is The Winter Soldier. This movie just worked for me because it took Captain America, a character wouldn't really care much about in the Avengers, and couldn't really relate to in Captain America the First Avenger, and made him just super awesome. The Russo brothers did the best job they ever could to make Captain America one of our favorite Avengers to this day. This was a movie with the best action scenes, and probably the most action scenes in any Marvel movie. The villain, who was the Winter Soldier, is a threatening villain who actually has a connection with the hero, which actually worked very well. The movie has mind-blowing stunt work, a fantastic plot, and makes it so you can't really trust anybody. It's kind of scary in a sense. Elevator scene made Captain America cooler than we've ever seen him before.
Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
In my opinion, this is my favorite Marvel movie, let alone my favorite superhero movie of all time. I'm gonna give Captain America Winter Soldier an A+. Thanks for watching, guys. Tell me in the comments below what your favorite MCU movies are ranked. Please be sure you subscribe and check out my latest videos. This is Ethan Butler, and I'm out.